fact that you were the first woman to be appointed.
I wanted to share my passion, share my knowledge.
It really probes into where you stand on lots of issues when it comes to gender diversity.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of the Gibraltar Business Podcast. A quick thank you to our sponsors, the Gibraltar International Bank, for sharing our passion for business, to the GFSB, and of course the team behind the scenes, the amazing team at Barton Solutions for making these episodes pop. I'll get on with the discussion now, and this week we are framing our episode around the GFSB's Women in Enterprises event around International Women's Day. It's happening at Isolas, the offices, and they have gladly hosted our event today. And so it's no coincidence that I'm here with Emma Lejeune. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Delighted.
No, it is an honor to meet you because you have recently been in the news, and we'll come back to that in a second. So yeah. Welcome to the show. But before we get there, Emma, it's a question that I ask a lot of guests that sit in this seat right there is, you have worked in law for about 20 years, if I'm not right?
That's right.
What made you get into that profession in the start? At what stage did you think, wow, this is for me and this is what I want to do?
Well, my father's a lawyer, so I've always admired his profession, his role and his job, essentially, and I've done work experience at his firm when I was very young, and that definitely got me interested. But I also liked watching TV shows like Law and Order, Ally McBeal. You might remember Ally McBeal many years ago. And then I think what sealed it for me was actually the book by John Grisham, The Street Lawyer. I read that book and it had a big impact on me, and I thought, you know what, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I think,
oh wow!
Yeah, so I think that's really what sparked my journey.
I tell you what, the media and TV, they get a lot of bad reputation for influencing in negative ways, but that's a great way to sort of start a profession. And John Grisham had lots of books within the legal profession too.
Yes, he did.
Oh, you've taken me back. What keeps you, okay, so that's what maybe sparked your inspiration. Fast forward to now, what keeps you motivated?
I've got a very good support system and fan club around me. So I'd say my parents are probably the number one cheerleaders, and they have been very supportive throughout. So I definitely would credit a lot of my success to them, and my family in general. But I think I've always been a very ambitious and motivated and disciplined individual. Even in sports that I've carried out, I used to row, and I was very, very dedicated. And I think that sort of edge to my character is really what keeps me going. I probably am my own worst competition because I just want to outdo myself every time, and I think that's what keeps me sort of ticking over.
So it's what is it? It's the competitive element, right?
That's right.
But you're competing with yourself.
Keep competing with myself, yeah, definitely. I think that's the best way to succeed, to be honest. It's sometimes, and I think I may have alluded to this in some of my interviews recently, but I believe that if you're looking over your shoulder, then that's when you lose the race. You almost have to stop comparing yourself to other people and just focus on what you need to do to get to that next level, and and take things further and achieve your goal, or get to the end point wherever you want to be. I
think that's amazing, and it's easier said than done sometimes, but great advice. On that kind of on your motivation and success, congratulations, you've recently been appointed as chair of the Law Council here in Gibraltar.
Thank you.
How does it feel in that appointment?
Well, it's an honour and a privilege to be, appointed as the chair of the Law Council. I mean, essentially, it's heading the body that represents the legal profession, so it's quite a big role. Very big shoes to fill, because a lot of prominent lawyers in the community have actually held the position before, and so I definitely have big shoes to fill there. But for me, it's about giving back to the community, and I'm passionate about law, as you can see. And I think what better way than to give back to my own sector. So I think by dedicating the time and being able to help shape the legal profession going forward, and help do that here in Gibraltar, I mean, that for me is a privilege.
And the news headlines recently on that appointment focused on the fact that you were the first woman to be appointed as such. How does that feel?
Well, I think a lot of people will ask, how come it's taken so long for a woman to be appointed as a chair of the Law Council? But I mean, to be honest, I think just alluding back to the point that I said a couple of minutes ago, because I try not to compare myself to other people, whether you're male or female, or it doesn't really make a difference to me. I think it's always, you should always achieve things according to merit as opposed to gender. I know that there are arguments for, maybe having female may actually have a harder time getting to certain roles, and because of other considerations. But I think that if you just look at it individualistically and you look at it as a path that you have to take, and you just navigate the obstacles that present themselves on your path, whether you're a man or woman, because there'll be obstacles on both paths, then it's really a case of merit and effort and hard work and building up that network around you that will support you and will help you get there.
I think too often that label is put on by external. No? It's something they're looking for a hook. They're looking for something to highlight. But it's a great perspective on it for sure. Now you're appointed as chair. What are your priorities? What are you going to kind of start doing?
Well, I mean, now that I'm appointed as chair, I suppose big responsibilities. But we tend to prioritize things as a board, and obviously as a chair, I'd make sure that those priorities that strategy is taken forward. I think what we'd want to do is we'd want to continue to nurture the legal profession in Gibraltar, in particular a collaborative approach. So make sure that we are united as lawyers in the profession, no matter whether we work in private practice or in-house or Crown Counsel. I think we're much better when we all work together. I think we'd want to make the legal profession a little bit more contemporary in keeping with the times. And also continue to encourage young people sort of, regain that magic and the prestige of what it is to be a lawyer, but also encourage young people that, things have changed and it is possible to be a lawyer and have a bit more of a work-life balance, for example. It is possible to be a lawyer and a lawyer in a different role. It doesn't necessarily have to be private practice. It can be in a financial services firm. So there are much more opportunities, I think, nowadays that can be explored.
You mentioned there balance, no? Like you mentioned, like you can be a lawyer and have a good work-life balance. Do you think that some of the perception around law centers around that?
Yes, absolutely. I think that private practice, I mean, if you did watch the Suits and
they're always in the office.
They're always in the office and late nights and sometimes all-nighters and and that happens. It has happened to me in my career. I have done a couple of all-nighters, I think. But it's not always the case. And nowadays with flexible working, being able to work from home, being able to work different hours, not necessarily a 9 to 8 job, it can be different hours. You can come in later, you can work later, you can come in earlier, you can leave earlier. I think so long as the work gets done, that's the primary focus. So long as you're giving that service to the client, you've done your bit. Again, as I quoted in my piece in the Chronicle, I think, one of my clients said to me once, I don't see my job as a 9-to-5 job anymore. I just see it as something that has to fit into my life. So, you could wake up on a Saturday morning and say, I'm going to clear emails for the next hour or so, and it doesn't matter, just so long as the work gets done,
Yeah, I've read something recently on that as well, of kind of, we all talk about work-life balance, when actually it's just balance.
Yes.
For myself as well, I run my own business. I have to, if it means Saturday morning I spend doing emails, as you say, that means that maybe I can take time up from other places. So to achieve that, again, is easier said than done. And another thing you mentioned there was around unity or collaboration across Gibraltar's legal profession. That's huge.
Yes.
What does that look like?
Well, we've got a few events planned in our legal calendar, which I won't give too much away on that, so that will be coming up. But I think it's trying to bring the legal community together and do things, whether it's charitable events or social events, and have that opportunity for people to meet and socialize and talk about our profession and get together and discuss issues or discuss opportunities that we might want to explore as a profession. So I think that's certainly something that we'll be prioritizing going forward.
There's certainly opportunities for that, but talking about some of the challenges now, and taking ourselves out of individual practice areas, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges or biggest blockers for Gibraltar's legal profession at the moment?
At the moment, because we're going through a transitional time, I think we are actually changing our regulatory system. So we have our own regulator. I mean, that has been a bit of a challenge because it's completely changed the atmosphere, the environment in which we are operating. For the better, I would say, because it's certainly something that is needed. But it has meant that, in particular, I say smaller firms have had to deal with much more administration, or they've had to sort of change their infrastructures. And a lot of it is driven by outside, demands, international demands, such as Moneyval and things like that. So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest challenges we've been facing as a profession at the moment. Another one would probably be reputational, because, sometimes lawyers don't get the best reputation, but again, people neglect to see the good things that the lawyers do. So I've pointed out in the past, often when there are big firms that come to Gibraltar, it all started off with a lawyer who had a contact in a law firm in another jurisdiction, who had a client who wanted to headquarter their business in Gibraltar, and then all of a sudden, you've got a business here that's employing thousands of people. So definitely there is much, much more to what a lawyer does than people see, and I think that it's difficult to get that message across because people won't look so far behind.
I think you're right. I think when you look at maybe watching TV or reading books, the lawyers that come out on the TV sell you one vision or one kind of route, right? But there are so many, and I think that it's going to be a challenge to try and get that out to younger people as well.
Yes.
The breadth of opportunity available.
Definitely, there's a lot of opportunity, and I believe that we are big contributors to the economy in Gibraltar, and that's definitely something that shouldn't be overlooked.
So a lot to do with your role. Yes. Emma, today's event and interview and episode is centered around the GFSB's International Women's Day event, which is being held here in your offices. The event is all about gender equality. How far do you think the legal sector has come on gender balance, and where does it still have work to do?
I think we've come a long, long way. There are definitely a lot more female lawyers now than there was, I'd say, 20, 30 years ago. I think that still could improve a little bit, but it definitely is going in the right direction. In terms of, I believe that, as we discussed earlier, because we have so much more flexibility nowadays, and you can work from home. There is much more fluidity in terms of working hours. I think that certainly will help. It'll definitely help women who are becoming young mums and who still want to continue on their career path to be able to do so. Equally, it will encourage male lawyers who would like to take paternity leave or have more of a role at home to do so as well and have that opportunity. So hopefully that will help create a more balanced playing field, let's say.
And open it up, I think.
Exactly.
What you're talking there is about almost barriers to enter kind of the profession or stay within the profession as well, right?
That's right.
As a leader, in kind of you're looking at your role here at Isolas and the different hats that you wear, how important is it, in your opinion, to mentor and support the next generation of women?
I think that's of fundamental importance. I mean, I think it's definitely, you need to be their biggest supporter. You need to give them the right tools that they need to succeed. But most importantly, I think you've got to be the best role model. And I'm a firm believer of leading by example. So I think that if you lead by example, then people can learn from you. I've been privileged enough to have some really good mentors in my career. And I think that's probably why I've ended up taking on so many roles, because some of the mentors I had were people that actually did the same sort of thing in the industry, took on roles in industry bodies. And I think, sometimes they say the best way to learn is to shadow somebody. And by doing that and really paying attention to what they do, how they interact, their mannerisms, I think manner is very important. And it's something that is often, taught. It's not something that you just pick up. You've got to learn it. So I think showing people all of those things, you're giving them a good toolbox in order to be able to, get to the right places and succeed and move forward and progress.
But leading by example sometimes, doesn't it feel like so much pressure?
It does. It feels like pressure, and none of us are perfect. I mean, we all make mistakes, and as a leader or manager, I mean, I certainly have made my own mistakes, and then I've gone back and thought, I should have handled this a bit differently. But one thing I've always tried to do is support people, in particular when they've had any personal issues that they've had to deal with, and certainly when women have gone off to have their children and then come back, I've always tried to support them, because as a mum myself, I know what it's like. And I've also gone through my own difficulties throughout my career when I became a mum, and I definitely wouldn't want anybody to go through those challenges that I had to face. So I think that it's important to remember that we are all human. First and foremost, we're people, and then we're lawyers. And therefore, we need to also remember that human and emotional side and give that support.
Also, we are human lawyers, but we've also got the element of gender. And I know that some of my questions have been around supporting other women, and obviously with today's event being International Women's Day. But what do you feel is the role of men in terms of trying to create and sustain that level playing field?
I think it's a question of education and understanding. I think men have to understand that women have different paths. I think they have to respect that we have a different path, but that path will lead to exactly the same place as their own path. It's just that we might have to jump through different hoops. We might have a few more hoops to jump through, but in the same way as women should support women, I think men should support women, and women should support men. And sometimes I find that women work better with men more than women working with women, ironically, or even men working with men. I think because we have different skill sets that complement each other. But as that famous book that says, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, we're completely different creatures, and it's a question of accepting that women and men are different, and supporting those differences, and also trying to take the best out of those individuals.
I think even locally, we're doing more with International Women's Day, International Men's Day. It's about kind of looking at, I think, in my opinion anyway, spotlighting some of the issues that we face and can share and can work on solutions for. So absolutely.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end of the interview, and I wanted to kind of go back on something else that you said, which was about bringing the legal profession up to more modern practices, right? What are some of those, in your opinion, in your role as a lawyer here at Isolas, as a partner, and also as your chair of the Law Council? What are those areas that you feel still needs work done for modernization?
I think it's more the messaging around it, because we certainly have moved on to times where we do have that flexibility. We are able to work remotely quite from anywhere. I mean, you don't even have to work from Gibraltar. You can be away for a few months and still have that ability to be connected as if you were in the office. So I think it's raising that awareness and letting young people know that that is possible, that there is flexibility, that the hours are fluid if we want to have that fluidity, or if we need that fluidity, that it is possible to have more of a work-life balance. It's not a to-be-seen syndrome in the sense that you have to be seen in the office between 9 and 10 in the evening.
But do you think that still does happen in some practices? Or?
Yes, I think it does still happen, and I think it's difficult, and I'm going to include myself in that. And I think for us older lawyers, because we've all been trained in a certain environment, and certainly before COVID, which is where I think that sort of ability to the perception changed. So, and it's very difficult once you get into that sort of train of thought of, oh, I should be in the office, or I should, I'm not in the office, I should be it's very difficult to get out of that mentality. But if you really, really look at it, that the bottom line is you need to provide that service, you need to do that work. So long as that work gets done and it gets done to a standard, it doesn't really matter if you're sitting in the office, if you're sitting in your living room, or if you're sitting in a hotel in Dubai. It's definitely, it doesn't make a difference. And I think it's something that young people should know, because I think it's something which is quite off-putting. And nowadays, things have changed. I think people's priorities have changed, rightly so. COVID had a big effect on that. And I think it made us all sort of take stock and say, hang on a second, we've got one life, we have to live it, but we can't be slaves to our desks. But certainly that's the message I think we should be getting out there to the profession.
Absolutely, and I think COVID for me was that game changer. We just thought, look, oh my God, I've got this thing in my hand, this device, and where I can work from anywhere pretty much. I think some of the challenge that we're facing now is when to put it down and stop working, because you work a lot more with your phone, I think. Exactly. But that's for a whole other discussion.
Yes, no, I know. Well, yeah, there are times when I do want to throw my phone out the window.
I'm so happy it's not just me. Yeah. Emma, final question, and you have mentioned young people there in your last response. What advice would you give to young women, and in fact young men as well, who are starting their careers and maybe want to join the legal profession?
Well, I'm going to quote Minister Arias Vázquez, who actually gave a really good speech at an event I was at yesterday. And she said, we should acknowledge to, in particular, this is probably for women more than for men, but we have to acknowledge that it isn't easy for women. But we have to let them know that it is possible, and that we are there to support them. And I think that's a very strong message to send, because she's absolutely right in saying it isn't an easy ride. It's not an easy path. I don't necessarily think that women are the only ones that face obstacles in their careers. I think men have their own issues and their own obstacles and challenges to overcome. But I do acknowledge that, in particular, young women starting families, and in certain cases there may be particular issues that make things even harder. We do have that additional obstacle that we have to overcome. So I think that creating a support system is very important. Creating the right network is very important. But also that education and communication and collaboration between your peers and the people around you. And making them known that that you're there to support them, and that you're there to be able to help them through the hoops they have to jump, I guess.
In the process. So, Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Yeah. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
So, Jerome, thank you for joining me on the Gibraltar Business Podcast. Today's event is around International Women's Day, and you are hosting a workshop, aren't you? What's the workshop about?
Yes, I am. I'm Jerome, and I'm a field hockey player. I've been playing field hockey all my life, and today I'm a coach. I'm a coach for the Titans Hockey Club, and I coach the men, but I also coach the women. And there are a few differences between the way I coach the women and the men, and that's what I'm going to talk about. But I think it's more an exchange, because there will be a lot of women in the room, and I'm happy to learn and become better as a coach. So I want to have the feedback and some inputs more from the group.
I'll ask you about some of the kind of differences in the experience as a coach before we get there, but I'm curious to know a bit more about you. You mentioned off camera that you've been in 2 Olympic Games, right?
Yes, I did. It's been a while, but I've done it. I was in Beijing in 2008. We competed there with Belgium. I'm Belgian. And then we played in London as well in 2012. And we finished 5th there. I had an amazing experience, great moments, really goosebumps when I'm talking about it.
Wow. I bet. Yeah. So I want to ask you about that. How do you then, you're competing at that level, how do you, from Belgium, what brings you to Gib?
We made the decision, we took the decision 3.5 years ago with my family, my wife Vanessa and my 2 daughters, to leave Belgium and to go in for the experience of living in Spain. So I live in Estepona now since 3.5 years. And I played for Benalmádena 1 year as a player. It went really well. I had an amazing season, was great. And then I quit. I started real estate business, and I was missing hockey way too much. So I contacted a hockey club here, Titans, which had an amazing branding and logos. And I got in contact with Diana Susi, which is an amazing woman. She should be here today, actually. Is she? There is the sports event as well tonight. So, and so we got in contact, and the feeling was there immediately. I wanted to share my passion, share my knowledge, and since then I've been present here 3 or 4 times a week to help out to grow the club, and it's been a great experience so far.
That's a big commitment, 2 or 3 times a week. You're also involved in the Institute for Sport, right?
Yeah, so Gib is really small, and then I got in contact with Titans, and then I got in contact with Jocelyn Hoyt-Smith. She's an Olympian, but she's an medalist as well, so she's got the bronze medal. But besides that, she's got the Olympic values, but she's an amazing person, and she has a drive to make people better, and that's what GIS, the Institute of Sports, is about. We have our director, Haig, who's putting a lot of time into this project, and the idea is to help the sports associations to reach the highest level, especially the athletes that want more. We are there to share our experience, but to listen and to help them to improve. And as I said before, and it's something I'm going to talk about later today, is that the only way to improve is to test athletes, and it's something that we are not doing enough. It's also in football, netball, whatever sport. If you want to improve, you measure yourself in September, you measure yourself again in October, or every month if possible. You take into account the fatigue, but you need to grow on the short term and on the long term. And that's a thing to measure. It's not only about results, if you win or lose the game, but it's a long-term process. And I think it really makes a difference.
I think going back to what we said at the start, which is about you coaching the Titans, females, the opposite gender, which is what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
What are some of the differences between coaching a male team versus coaching a female team as a man?
I've been thinking a lot about it the last couple of days when I got invited to come and do this talk. And it's really difficult to say this is the difference. There are differences, of course, that are obvious. Is the way you talk to women or to men. But in the end, we are in a stage where there is also that part of femininity, I don't know how to say it, with the men as well. So it's not that I can talk really aggressive to a man. I think this time is past. There is also a way to talk to a man athlete, but I think with the women, it stays still sensitive to talk about ambition, to talk about physical parts of the aspects, which is one of the tasks I'm gonna talk about today, is how do you get a woman fitter with a man where you say, come on, you need to watch out what you eat, and it doesn't become immediately an eating disorder, or but with women and the image that is around, still a bit tricky. And as a coach, you want to do it right. You don't want to tell someone to lose weight and to do this. And I think there are some tools that I've been learning over the years to try to motivate to what do you want to achieve as an athlete, what are your strong points, and make those stronger instead of saying you're not fast enough, do this. No, you're very technical, work on that even more and do more exercises, and if you work on that, I think the physical part will follow instead of...
So a lot of it is around communication, I guess, sure. And it sounds to me like you're focusing more on the positives, and reinforcing that rather than pushing. And like maybe you would, if you all think of a coach, you might think stereotypically of someone saying, look, run faster, do that, don't eat that. It's not your style.
It's not my style, but I still make errors, that's for sure. There is still that part of me that wants the best, but the way I communicate is maybe not always the right one. But I've been working on it, and I've been following courses as well. And I will always remember, it was a course in Belgium, famous coach, a hockey coach from Holland. And he's done really good courses, and he always goes like, your kids come back home and they come with the red marks. I don't know if in Gibraltar it's red marks as well. If you have three,
I used to get lots of red marks. So yeah.
if they are not good, the first thing the parents are going to say, why do you have red marks in French, in mathematics? But on the other hand, you have this 7 out of 10 in languages, for example. And instead of focusing on those red marks, you can challenge your daughter or your son, and I'm really trying to do it at home. It's like from a 7, you can easily make an 8 out of 10 if you study or if you read your course just one more time. And if you do that with several courses or subjects, the rest will follow, and it's a different way of teaching things. And I'm a very positive-minded person, and I try to really put that into places in everything I do, actually, not only in coaching.
I was just about to say that. I think so much of what you're saying resonates with anyone who is performing at work, who needs to kind of achieve certain goals, motivation. It's all kind of linked, and I feel that we could talk for much longer than what we have.
For sure.
Just Jerome, just to kind of end on something, right? Is what advice then do you have for someone who wants to achieve that goal and is kind of maybe faltering?
Something, go and look on internet, but I had a sport psychologist, Jeff Brouwers, for me one of the best in the world. He talked about the circles of influence, and it's all about yourself. You can have the pressure from outside. You can have coaches that are good, that are bad. I had one of the best coaches. I had one of the worst coaches in my career, and they are all passants, des passants, that we say, people that come on your way. And
like transitory, no? Maybe.
Exactly, but if you have a coach that you dislike and it's just a period of your career, period of your life, just go for it, take what you can get of positive, and focus on your circle, focus on what you can do as a person, as an athlete to grow. It's like your nutrition, your sleep, your whatever you do that makes you happy, smile, and come with a great energy at training. And once this circle, you invest in that and invest in yourself, this circle becomes bigger and has influence on others, and you will be selected. Instead of saying, I'm not selected because of my coach, because of the other players. It's like, invest in yourself. It's make common sense, I think, but
easier said than done sometimes, right?
Exactly.
Lastly, if any of our listeners and people watching want to get involved with the sport or you, how do they find out a bit more?
Go and check on GIS, our website, and also through Titans, and I'm always happy to have a quick chat. Also, we have a great new event taking place on the 20th of June. We still need to get our allocation booked, but it should work out. And it's a beach hockey. So we started beach hockey a few months ago. So we bought a beach hockey pitch. We had our first test event at the pitch in Victoria Stadium on the pitch, but the idea is to do it on the beach. Wow. We got an agreement with the government for that, and so the 20th of June we want to do like an event for hockey players, but especially for companies who want to send one team, the firemen, anyone we want to make it.
We love sport here in Gib, so I'm sure that.
So I'll see you there
well,
on the pitch.
Thank you, Jerome. Thank you.
My pleasure.
So Jo, thank you for joining me in the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I can't believe I know we've collaborated on certain things like Thrive magazine, but we haven't done a podcast. So
I know, well, first time for everything.
I know that many of the people watching or listening will know who you are. But
that sounds ominous already.
But tell us a bit about your background.
Okay, so, well, before I moved to Gibraltar 24 years ago, I was a youth worker. So that was very much kind of how I grew up in that world. Came to Gibraltar, worked in various sectors actually, because there was nothing in the charity sector which I'd always worked in before when I came here. And kind of eventually came full circle, put everything together and set up Rock Learning, a kind of learning and development consultancy where I provide mainly leadership and management courses, also equality and diversity and soft skills courses, and bring trainers to Gibraltar on all sorts of topics and run conferences, including a diversity conference.
That's a lot. That's a lot that you do, right?
Quite a lot, yes, quite a lot.
Today's show is framed around International Women's Day, which I know that you're involved with an event that's being run by the GFSB. You're running a workshop, right?
I am.
What's it on?
So we don't have very long. So it's actually on unconscious gender bias. And the aim of it, it's like a values quiz on which takes into account the environment that we grew up in, what our thoughts and feelings are on the topic, and it asks lots of questions which really you have to answer honestly, and it really probes into where you stand on lots of issues when it comes to gender diversity. So people could say, yes, I'm really into equality and everything, but then as you probe, some of the questions like almost not very personal, but like touch on quite sensitive issues, and that's when we have a lot of discussion
that's when you
afterwards.
Have a discussion. And
yes.
If someone who's listening doesn't know what it is, what is unconscious gender bias?
So, well, unconscious bias in general are the biases we would have against perhaps certain minority groups, and they are formed unconsciously and very much based on how we've been brought up, where we were educated, our family environment, the views that we've been exposed to, and quite often the minority groups that we've been exposed to and haven't been exposed to. Most people, the most common unconscious bias is called the affinity bias or the like me bias. So to give an example, you're much more likely to give a promotion or a job or recruit somebody who is like you. Maybe they're Gibraltarian. You went to the same school as them. You went to the same university as them. You have the same level of education as them. You're both part of the same minority group. Like unconsciously, we have an affinity to these people, which means we're more likely to give them opportunities. And if all of us did that all of the time, we'd all be in very non-diverse groups.
Do you feel that if once people know that they may be carrying some unconscious bias, helps them tackle it?
I think the first stage is knowing what your unconscious biases are. I do a lot of workshops on that as well, and there's different tools that you can use to discover your unconscious biases. And once you've discovered them, it's important you learn how to manage them. So like to push yourself out of your comfort zones a bit and try to engage people that you wouldn't normally engage with, perhaps, and give them a chance. Because then if we have diversity of thought and diversity of cultures and lots of other minority groups within our surroundings, we're much more likely to have successful businesses. And I mean, statistics prove it like really ups the business bottom line.
You're also involved in a conference that's coming up, right? The Equality and Diversity Conference.
Yeah, Count Me In, it's called, yeah.
Which is coming up when?
Well, it's actually coming up in a couple of weeks in the Isle of Man, and the Gibraltar one's going to be on the 9th of September, day before National Day.
Right, okay, so save that one. But
yes.
I want to talk to you something about a bit of a hot topic, actually, because equality, diversity has been in the news on the other side of the Atlantic with Trump seemingly to roll back some of the laws. What's your take on that? Yeah,
I mean, we're seeing a massive pushback. We see even this week, like Google have taken International Women's Day out of their calendar. And, we're seeing a global backlash. My take on it is that we don't have a choice about diversity. I mean, just as an example, and I actually gave it as an example today as I was doing a press release to promote the conference. Almost 40% of school-aged children now have a special educational need. Not all neurodiverse, but some kind of special educational need. 40%, right? They are our future customers. They are our future workforce. So if we don't have workplaces and recruitment processes that are going to include these people, we are missing out on a massive chunk of the talent pool. So that's just one example. Now, so Trump can say whatever he likes, yeah, but the reality is that having diverse workforces has been proven to, you know, achieve great results on the business bottom line.
Absolutely. I think when you're working in the space and you see it and you acknowledge it, it's great. But my concern, and I think a lot of people who are seeing this rollback, is like, once it's off that Google Calendar, what needs to happen for it to go back on? It just feels like a huge step back.
So I actually think that it's not 100% a bad thing to see this global backlash, and I'll explain why. I think that DEIB initiatives have a following, and we do lots of events in this space, and many have happened over the years, and the people that we attract to these events are not the people we need to be speaking to. They're already the converted. So we're basically preaching to the converted. And I think by moving away from having diversity initiatives into building more inclusive workplaces and encouraging managers to build more inclusive teams, you know, the reality is that somebody isn't just part of one minority group. You know, they might be a woman who is a lesbian and possibly with ADHD, you know, so that's already kind of 3 minority groups. Not that a woman's a minority, although we're still treated like minorities, but that's already, it's the whole intersectionality piece, you know, and I think we should be looking at the individuals that we come into contact with as a human being with whatever their needs are, whatever, maybe they've got children, maybe they've got elderly parents they need to look after.
And I don't doubt it. I think that's what we should be doing. But I mean, the minute you take away the guardrails or the obligation from a legal point of view, like America seems to be doing, that's the challenge, right? Am I the only one scared here? Or?
Well, look, I mean, here we have legislation. We have the Equal Opportunities Act in Gibraltar. So there is legal protection against discrimination. You know, we have the protected characteristics here, not the same as in the UK, but almost the same as in the UK. And so he may be pushing back on the initiatives. Whether that's going to end up in legislation being changed, I doubt that very much. I mean, you still cannot discriminate against people by law. So I don't know. I think it's a bit of a hot air balloon at the moment.
Okay.
And I think there are other ways around it. And the conversation has to continue.
I think Trump and hot air balloon in the same statement is good. Jo, thank you. Good luck with your session today. And thank you for joining me on the show.
Thank you very much.